Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So I think we're ready to put a clutch together. I'll give you a quick overview of everything that's happened here. I got the pressure plates back from the clutch shop. They put a new grind on those, so 2115's plates should work just fine in 1113. Input shaft actually cleaned up very well, a lot better than I was expecting, so real happy about that. The sleeve that the seal rides on had to be replaced. This is 2115's input sleeve, and it was in much better shape than the rusted and pitted one that came out of 1113. There was just enough scarring around that seal lip area. I chose to replace it. A speedy sleeve would probably fix that up, but I had a better one on hand, so we're going with that. And of course, we saved the release fork, the vertical shaft, the spider. I have the new rebound pins turned to the same dimension as the old ones. 3 new release springs. We'll get into the specs on those later. And I made 3 little washers for the peened over ends on those pins, so we're good there. Now, the release collar and hub, this is one out of a parts unit. It's not new old stock, but it's pretty darn close. 1113's received the Evapo rust soak, and it's so badly pitted in all the places where it needs to be polished and smooth that I decided there's no way we're going with that. So we have a very, very good piece to replace that with. Now the bronze release collar. Again, another piece that was in like new condition, and it actually cleaned up very well. I did have this new old stock one that I was prepared to dump into 1113, but with the original being in basically the same shape as the new one, there's no point in using this, so I'll retain this for my next basket case adventure. Then we have all of the pins, the dogs, the links, new cotter pins, and we have a new old stock clutch disc. Well, it was made in 1995. I guess it qualifies technically as being new old stock yet. And of course, 1113's original disc. You guys have seen this. We, of course, ripped most of the fingers or the teeth off the outside, pulling the engine out because it was so stuck in the flywheel because of rust, and then, you know, everything else on the surface. It's a shame too, because there's virtually no wear on this. I can just barely catch the wear edge with my fingertip or my fingernail on the outside, and it's a shame the elements just got to it. That would have been a really, really good disc, but that's the whole rundown on what's on the bench. So let's get started throwing it all together. First thing I'm going to do is assemble the 4 dogs to the ears of the spider. Each pin gets just a little shot of grease, as do the pivots on the dog. Then each pin is secured with a cotter pin or a split pin, depending on where you reside. Have to wonder how fast the employees back in the day at the cat factory were at installing and folding these cotter pins, because just these 4 clutch dogs have eaten up 8 cotter pins already. And we're going to consume 16 more before we're done building the spider. So we'll use the same process now to assemble the links to the collar. Now we can place the collar onto the spider, keeping it in register with the alignment peg. Like a ninja. And after securing the final pins, the last thing I need to do is install the bronze release collar. So get both halves put on. I have plenty of grease in that flange. This is oil fed, drip fed actually. You'll see how that works once I start putting it all in the bell housing, but we're still a ways off from that. Starting the bolts. Now, there are two flats that are a little bit narrower, and they are designed to go right up against the head of the bolt to keep this in from turning. And on the other end goes a fold over lock and the nut on top of that. All right, with that we have a fully assembled spider. That collar didn't even spin at all when I took it apart. We really improved everything there. So, boy, I just love mechanisms like that. I could just stare at those forever. Anyway, spiders together, and that cleared most of the parts off the bench. So the next thing I'm going to do is to get the rebound, what did I call these, pins? Rebound pins and springs put into the front pressure plate. I mentioned I was going to get into the specs of these springs before. Now, there's the old, of course, pins, washers, and springs, and there's the new. So you can see the springs I sourced are basically an identical match to the old ones. Oops, knocking things over here. And these are, well, you can still find the original cat part numbered ones on eBay, places like that. These are not in a very severe operating environment. I just buy the generic hardware store springs. That's all I've ever used. The specs are 1 3/4 inch overall length, 1/2 inch outside diameter, and they are a .054 wire gauge spring. I've never had poor service with those. And comment section under, I think the last video or maybe a couple back, some concern over proper hardness and everything. I turned these out of like a grade 5 bolt, and I believe that's still going to be harder than what these are. They drill like a soft rivet. You put a drill bit on the end of those and the metal just curls off. You can hit them with a file really, really easily. So there's nothing special or hard about those. Like I said, they're not in that severe of an environment. So we got that stuff ready. Let's start putting it in the plate. And I put these in without any grease or lubrication. I want those dry because I don't want anything that's slick coming off and getting in the clutch disc. There they are. And we're outside now because I'm going to use some heat to soften the ends of these to help them peen over a little bit. Considering they are grade 5, they don't deform as easy as just regular soft steel like a rivet would be. So I have them supported on the back side by 1113's original really rusty pressure plates, so it should serve as a good backstop. I don't want to hammer on the one that I just had machined. So we'll start with putting the washer down onto that shoulder. We'll heat that up and we'll mash it over now. Okay, happy with how all three of those went in. So we can set the new clutch disc on there. And yes, it misses all three of those, just like it should. And now the rear pressure plate. Let's engage all the teeth. There we are. Check the spring action. Just like it should be. And to finish up, we can put the spider onto the pressure plates. And once again, my favorite flavor of long-lasting grease on the threads of that hub. So, just need to start everything without cross-threading. There we are. That sure is a lot easier than it came apart, right? Okay, our detent pin is starting to engage, so we'll hold that up. We'll just stop and check this from time to time. Our dogs aren't contacting the plate yet. Okay. Okay, we're getting close to having a good over-center engagement by hand. We'll just advance it to the next hole. Right there. Okay, that's a good over-center engagement just using hand pressure. Of course, that's very light compared to what the final adjustment would be once you have the leverage of the linkage and the main clutch lever and everything, but that's good. We're locked up. We're gripping the disc. See if we can do a disengagement here. Yep, there we are. We're disengaged once again. Pressure plate has been pushed away from the disc by the springs. Liking it. Well, it was a lot of work, but this is what we saved, this is what we cleaned, and this is what we built out of that rusty and stuck bell housing on 1113. I'm really happy with everything that's right here, and I'll tell you what, I'm no connoisseur of art, but for this old boy, that's what this might as well be. I love the differing metals that went into the construction of this, all the manual installations of the cotter pins on all the pivots, the over-center mechanism that applies the squeeze to the pressure plates. This is the kind of stuff that my brain is just wired for right here. Love it. But you can see I have this other clutch setup sitting here. Now, at first glance, they both look the same. And from the spider on out to the top, they both are the same. All identical components as far as those are concerned. But looking at the clutch disc, you can see this one's about 3/8 of an inch thick, whereas this one is 5/8 of an inch thick. So what we have here is the early D3400 clutch that was in the J Series D2s. This is the later D311 clutch that was in the U Series D2s. Now, in 1947, the J Series production run came to an end, and so did the use of that 3 3/4 bore D3400 diesel engine. It underwent a rather significant redesign where they took that 3 3/4 inch bore out to 4 inches, and they developed more of a cross-flow cylinder head, bigger valves, breathed a lot better. They also re-engineered the fuel system and governor system. So the increased power output meant they had to go with a bigger clutch. The funny thing is, the drivetrain of the Caterpillar D2 was already so overbuilt, they didn't change the input shaft of the transmission one bit. So these clutches could be fully interchanged with one another. You would not want to take the smaller D3400 clutch forward and put it behind a D311, but you can take the heavier D311 clutch and go backwards and put it behind a D3400 and have no problems whatsoever. So how did they fit that bigger clutch on the same input shaft? Well, I took the later U-Series clutch apart, and behind it I placed 1113's pitted pressure plates and 2115's old friction discs. So you'll note that the pressure plates we've been dealing with in these last few episodes are flat all the way across their face. But the later U-Series plates, they simply put about an 1/8 inch step in each one, and that's where they gained the room that they needed to throw that thicker disc in there. Flipping these over now to get a look at the back side. So to fit that thicker disc, it wasn't as simple as just milling the required amount of material out of the faces of these old plates. They actually added material to the back sides of the new ones. So they were able to retain the strength there, but still get their step on the inside. Looking at the friction discs, I'll place one on top of the other. you can really see the difference in thickness right there, but the outside and inside diameters are the same. So that heavier disc did not increase the contact area against the pressure plates, but it did increase the contact area of these teeth where they interface with the flywheel. And that brings us to the final thing I wanted to talk about with these D2 clutches. As I place the disc in the flywheel, you can see the way those teeth engage with one another. That's what transmits the power into the clutch. But you want to have the main clutch snapped in or engaged whenever possible, because when these are allowed to idle with the clutch disengaged, there's no tension on the disc, and it can float around and vibrate and oscillate inside those teeth, and it will wear the external teeth right off of the disc in short order. When that happens, your tractor doesn't move anymore. You have to split it in half and replace the disc. But when you engage the clutch, the pressure plates grab the disc and they hold it steady against those flywheel teeth, and it really can't move around. So you don't have all that movement going on that's putting rapid wear on these teeth. And you can see the teeth on this one are getting pretty sharp. That's why that thing is so loose in there. It's normal to see wear on the drive side of the teeth, but this has wear on both sides, which leads me to believe it was in a machine that was idled with the main clutch disengaged quite a lot, and it did a lot of vibrating in there. This disc came out of the Iron Mistress when I first took her apart, and you can see we're missing some teeth already, but I don't think that was from the wear that happens when the clutch is disengaged. I think that was because they didn't have the disc properly aligned in the pressure plates when they put the engine back on the transmission, and it was canted off to one side, and some of those were actually ripped off because there were still a few remnants that were kind of hanging loose but were pulled way to the rear. So I'm pretty sure that explains why those are missing there. But in all reality, these over-center clutches offer an excellent service life if operated properly, meaning as you come to a stop and disengage the clutch, put the transmission in neutral, re-engage the clutch again, it keeps the vibration off of those fiber teeth, and they last a long, long time. So, and on the topic of the interchangeability factor between this early clutch and the late one, it's getting very common for people that have the earlier J-Series tractors just to do the upgrade to the later style thicker disc whenever they have to go in there for service, because these thinner discs are virtually obsolete. Luckily, I'd picked this new old stock one up a while ago just for the 1113 project. If it hadn't have been for that, I would have also been doing this U-Series thicker disc changeover myself. But to date, I have not had to do one of those. And that leads me to my next question I have. I've read some of the forums where people have said a couple times, they've mentioned that they've also had to change the diesel engine flywheel over to match that later style clutch. So I did some research and I have my parts manuals laid out here. This is the early 5J parts manual, and you can see we have a 7B6895 flywheel, okay? Down here we also have the 7B6895 flywheel in the later U-Series book. So that tells me there shouldn't be any difference between those two flywheels. I don't know why you'd have to change them. If there was any difference, it would have to be in the corresponding teeth inside the flywheel to see if they're wide enough to really mesh with that thicker disc like they should. But when I put that U-Series disc in this first gen flywheel on 1113, everything seemed to match up just fine. Teeth were all of corresponding thickness. I didn't see any problems. So if anybody watching this has ever done that changeover and put that newer style clutch into the older style J-Series tractors, let me know if you had to replace the flywheel or not, because I don't have a D311 flywheel on hand right now that I can do any measurements on and verify. So I would really like to know if that really has to be done. But that brings us to the end of the clutch saga. We really saved a lot from inside that rusty, nasty bell housing, and I am so hoping that I'm pretty much out of the woods as far as water damage goes, with all the breakage and cracking that was in all of the engine blocks and the cylinder heads, to all the rust damage that was in the starting pinion and the bell housing. I hope the other parts were were bathed in oil regularly and everything comes apart like it should. Let's hope. We still have steering clutches yet, which are going to be a little bit scaly, but I'm not as scared of those. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. We saved a whole lot of pieces out of there, and I'm pretty happy with 1113's new clutch. So, and 2115 lives on once again. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you back again.